Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a special video ranking all of the books that I read in 2024 that were published in 2024. I love making videos like this. This is me talking about specifically the books I read this year that were published this year. Basically, me just reading new releases. I am not counting anything that was published recently, like in 2023 or 2022, because there were a few books I read that were published really recently, but not technically in this calendar year. I am specifically talking about books published in the year 2024, and books where the print, if the print version came out, when the print version came out. There are at least, I think, 2 books on here where technically the ebook came out previously, but it was not available to those of us who are print-only people, and I view myself as a print-only person. So if a book hasn't come out in print yet, it hasn't come out yet to me. So because of that, I am ranking the 2024 releases. Now, last year in 2023, I think I had like 23 books that matched the year. This year, it went way higher. I have more series I'm following, more authors I'm following, more friends of mine who are publishing books. I just have a lot more coming out and reading it as it's coming out. And so because of that, I have 34 books on the list this year. It's massive. I'm going to quickly go through and rank them to go from the worst to the best. I have 4 categories. I have the didn't like it category, which has 2 books. So really good that only out of 34 books that were published this year that I read, only 2 of them I didn't like. Then we have the it's fine category. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It's just okay. It's just okay. That category has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books in it, and then I have the it's great. It's just not amazing, but it's great. Like I had a blast reading these, and there are is that like 19? I think 19 or 18, somewhere around there. And then I have 7 in the 5 stars. Top tier great books category. And so I'm excited to talk about all of these. So we're going to start at the bottom, work our way towards the top. So starting with, and I have my notes here so I don't forget which number I'm on. So my number 34, which is at the bottom of the list for me, is going to be Mace Windu Glass Abyss. Yes, one of these Star Wars releases. This is honestly one of the worst Star Wars books in the canon for me. I did not like this book at all. There is like the villain I really liked, but nothing else about this book really engaged me. I feel like the author, Stephen Barnes, was just trying to write a science fiction, what I would call a creature feature science fiction, and it just doesn't work here. And so I'm really sorry that this book takes the last place out of the books published in 2024. Next, I have a book that breaks my heart to put this in the didn't like category, the only other book in the didn't like category, and that is Brandon Sanderson's Sunlit Man. This is one of those books that technically the ebook came out back in like October, November last year, but it didn't come out until like March of 2024 in actual print, like traditional print, not the special Kickstarter version. So because of that, I got the book in 2024, and I just didn't care for it. This is the only negative review I've really had of the Cosmere. I've liked a lot of the Cosmere, all of it, in fact, and Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author, and his epic fantasy and stuff is just what I love to read. But this one was a miss for me. However, it is made significantly better by Wind and Truth. If you've read Wind and Truth, you'll know what I mean by this. And so that's The Sunlit Man. Now we're getting into the books that were just okay. Not books that were bad by any means, I just thought they were okay. I didn't love them. I didn't hate them. I just thought they were okay. Let's start with Tales of Enlightenment by George Mann. This is a short story collection that was a bunch of short stories that I believe were originally published in Star Wars Insider, and some of them were originally published here. And also it's got interviews with authors, and it has some like timeline stuff, and so it's got some other stuff besides the short stories, but the majority of the book is the short stories. And it just didn't add that much. After reading it, I'm like, what value other than just just these characters existing. It's basically characters in a bar retelling stories and on the planet of Jeddah. And other than like a few tiny Easter eggs here and there, I was like, this was just largely forgettable. It was unnecessary. It was just kind of filling space. And the back matter, the interviews with the authors didn't reveal too much. The best part about this book is the timeline at the back, where it kind of helps you if you don't know everything that's come out. If you're a completionist trying to read everything in the High Republic, then maybe that timeline will be helpful, but it's not worth the whole book. Just find a screenshot of that one page. So yeah, this book, it was just okay. I thought it was fine. I didn't love the stories. I didn't hate them. I didn't think they were awful. I just was like, okay, that exists. So that's my number 32. Moving on to my number 31. 31 is going to be a horror thriller novel titled It Will Only Hurt a Moment by Delilah Dawson. Delilah Dawson is an author I love. She wrote some Star Wars books that I love. She wrote some original novels. The Violence, I think, is my favorite horror thriller novel, or one of them at least. She also writes YA thrillers, like the Hit and Strike books that I love. So she writes a lot that I love. And this book was just fine. It is very much what I would describe as a feminist thriller book. This woman goes to this art camp to try and kind of get over a bad breakup she had, and she ends up having visions of something unfortunate. And there's also kind of murder and a murder mystery happening as well. And it just kind of was okay. It was just okay. I thought there were some cool elements to it, but it was just an okay book. That's my number 31. My number 30 is a Star Wars middle grade book titled Escape from Valo. This is by Daniel Jose Older and Alyssa Wong. This is actually the longest middle grade book for Star Wars currently. It's almost the length of some of the YA books, which is really funny. Anyway, this book, it does some things right that a lot of the books didn't do, which is it made the middle grade books have stakes, it made them more epic, it made them larger scale, which I liked, but it didn't feel as impactful in some ways, and I didn't connect with a lot of the characters in it, but it sowed some seeds for another story that happens that I really did enjoy, and so that other story comes up later in the ranking, but I thought this one was fine. I thought it was, well crafted. It didn't resonate with me, but it was a fine story. So that's my number 30. My number 29 is a Star Trek Picard novel titled Firewall by David Mack. This is a Picard novel featuring Seven of Nine. This book is heavily influenced by Picard seasons 1 and 2. It is trying to take Seven after she left Starfleet and try to show how she joined up with the Fenris Rangers. And I just don't like that part of Seven's story. I much prefer what they do with Seven in Picard Season 3 when she's a member of the crew of the Titan. I much preferred her story there, and I'm excited to see where she goes if they ever make Star Trek Legacy. But the story here is going back to a version of Seven I just do not care for. Seven, and what's sad is Seven is one of my favorite Star Trek characters. Her character in Voyager, the TV show, fantastic. Her character in a lot of the books, the ones by Christy Golden and the ones by Kirsten Beyer, amazing journey. Her character in Picard Season 3, amazing. But her character in the first 2 seasons just was not good. And it's unfortunate that this is kind of reconciling Seasons 1 and 2 with Season 3, kind of, and it just did not particularly work for me. That being said, interviewing David Mack was pretty nice. All right, and the final of the It's Okay category, my number 28, is The Art and Making of Star Trek Picard, the series. This is by Joe Fordham. This is an art book primarily, which is a very different type of book for me to read. I read this because we were going to talk about it on Literary Treks. The publisher Titan Books sent us a copy each so that we could look at it and review it, and it has some beautiful artwork, and it has some really cool design stuff. When it talks about the writing of the series and the story decisions, it's actually really insightful. But those are very small and very few and far between details. The majority of the book is talking about how they made the actors' clothing, how they did the makeup and the prosthetics, how they designed the bridges, and how they designed the ships and all that stuff. And that's cool to someone. That's just not cool to me. If it had just been the making of the series, the writing of the series, it would have been an amazing book. But the rest of it, I was like, if this is your thing, that's great. I just didn't love it. So that's why it goes in my number 28. And I can't put it up there because it's going to fall, because I've tried this before. So I'm just going to put it down here on the floor. Now for my number 27, and we're moving into, I actually really enjoyed these books. I actually really enjoyed the next ones I'll talk about. So I'm excited, and there's a lot in this category. So again, I'll just kind of briefly talk about each one. And number 27 is Rhymer Hood by Gregory Frost. This is the second book in his Rhymer trilogy. This is very much elevated writing. It is very much a very specific style that Gregory Frost, a dark style that he has created for his writing. It is about dark elves, and it is about these kind of like evil creatures that are haunting medieval Europe. And specifically, you have Thomas the Rhymer, who was in book 1 in the trilogy, and now he is taken on the persona that is basically Robin Hood. And this book was about on the same level as the first one, actually. I enjoyed it. It just wasn't amazing. But it was an entertaining story. And so that's why this is number 27. Number 26 is going to be a indie pub book by Timothy Zahn titled Cloaked Deception. Timothy Zahn is my favorite science fiction writer. He writes so well. He writes such a wide swath type of science fiction. And this is him breaking into techno thrillers. It's not really, it's a political thriller, but it also is kind of a techno thriller. Basically, there is the ability to create this kind of cloak that can make something invisible, and they're trying to make weapons invisible so that they can, launch them against people. And the reason that this book is as low as it is it was forgettable after I read it. I read this whole book. It's for Timothy Zahn, it's a pretty decently sized book in length, word count, but just it didn't stick with me, and that's why I'm just ranking it so low. I enjoyed it in the moment as I was reading it. It was a fun thriller, but it just didn't stay with me. But I'm excited to read more of this publisher, this independent publisher, Athen Books. I'm really excited to read more of them in the future. But that's my number 27. My number 26 is a manga titled The Edge of Balance, Volume 3. This is by Shima, I always get this wrong, Shima Shinya and Daniel Jose Older. And the first volume in this series was written by Shima Shinya and also Justina Ireland, but Daniel Jose Older's taken over for Justina in all the rest of the volumes. And I say the same thing with all these, which, by the way, there is a review for literally each and one of these books on the channel, so just whatever the title is that you're interested in, look up the title and my name, you'll find it. But I say this with everyone, it's an entertaining story, it just should have been one huge volume because it's not worth the price point. But this one, yeah, it was a cool story. I read it in like 40 minutes, not even that, like 35 minutes. It's a really, really, really short story. Talking about short stories, it's not a short story, it is just not a long story. You guys know what I mean. It is the script for the audio drama Star Trek Picard No Man's Land by Kirsten Meyer and Mike Johnson. This is telling a fun adventure story between Raffi and Seven. It's just, I get why it's there. It actually ties into the comics, which I've read for Star Trek. Okay. I mean, it's entertaining in the moment, but as I trying to remember what was in this book again, I was like, oh yeah, there's some of the villains that are like these kind of pirates that they're dealing with, and also someone comes and tries to recruit Seven and Raffi back into the Fenris Rangers, and it just I enjoyed it in the moment, but after a while I was like, this didn't stick with me. My number 23 is going to be Defy the Storm by Jessa Granton and Justina Ireland. This is actually one of the better YA books, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by it. I thought that Justina and that Tessa did a really good job balancing the main characters in this book. There is a great concept of trying to break through the storm wall that is in the High Republic. If you've read the High Republic, you know what I'm talking about. Break through the storm wall so they could go rescue some people in this book. It's very much a character-driven book, but it was entertaining, and it has quite a surprisingly epic ending for a YA book, and I had a delightful time reading this. So that's why this is my number 23. My number 22 is another nonfiction, and it's a very out of my normal style reading for the channel, but very in touch with me, if you know me, and that is What's Next? The Backstage Pass to the West Wing, its cast, crew, and enduring legacy of service by Melissa Fitzgerald and Mary McCormick. This is a book talking about the production of the West Wing, and when it's talking about the production of the West Wing, it's amazing. It's a top-tier book. So much of the book is just talking about how the people who worked on the West Wing love service and helping out others. Yay, good for them. And I'm like, no. Just tell me about the production of the TV show. Don't tell the other stuff. And also the writer's style was just really bizarre at moments. The way they intercut with each other and like wrote it like they were just having a conversation was kind of weird at moments. But when it was talking about the production of the show, it was amazing. But the other stuff, I didn't care for it. But overall, I actually really enjoyed it. And it, provided some new information that was new to me. But a lot of this, if you've listened to like the West Wing Weekly, a lot of this you're going to know. A lot of this you're going to remember. So that is What's Next. It is my number 22. So what's next? My number 21 is going to be Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton. This is an adult novel in the High Republic. Despite really enjoying this book, it's my least favorite High Republic adult novel. Shows you how much I love the other adult novels. This one is an entertaining story. This one is a kind of romance, but it also is continuing on the epic story. It's an obvious, if you view the adult books as acts, Act 1 of this new thing, of the grand finale, Act 1 was The Eye of Darkness, which was a phenomenal Act 1. That was by George Mann. It came out last year. And then Act 3 is coming out next year, and that's going to be Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. And I'm so excited and stoked for that. This is Act 2. This is taking things from the first, doing some epic things with them, and setting up some stuff from the end. And it has some really cool stuff it's setting up for the end. But, it's not amazing. It's not as good as the other adult High Republic books. So that's why this is my number 21. My number 20 is going to be a Star Trek Strange New Worlds book, Asylum, by Una McCormick. This is the second Strange New Worlds book. It's a very short book. It's a very quick read for the Star Trek novels. However, it is a kind of run-of-the-mill story in some ways. It talks about the time that Pike and Una are at the Academy, and also contrasts it with the modern day, and they're dealing with this species that's dealing with some asylum claims, and another species from the same planet that hates them and doesn't want their culture to be around. And there's a lot of modern-day political influences in this book, which there are a lot of Una McCormick's books. And I really enjoyed the book. Overall. So, yeah, this was a pretty good one. That is Asylum. Then we have John Jackson Miller's return to Star Wars with Star Wars The Living Force. It has been 10 years since he wrote his last Star Wars novel. He spent the interim time just working for Star Trek, which he's written some amazing Star Trek books, and some just good Star Trek books. But this is his return to Star Wars. And I enjoyed it. Not as much as I enjoyed his others, like Kenobi or A New Dawn, but I still really enjoyed it. This is the Jedi Council leaves Coruscant to go and connect with the average person on the planet of Quim. Anyway, this book is Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan basically particularly Qui-Gon, convince the Council, hey, you guys understand the macro level of help, of like trying to save the galaxy, but you don't understand the micro level of helping out in your individual people. And so they leave to go through a celebration on this planet and really help out the individual people. And there's a bunch of viewpoints from the Jedi characters, and they're delightful. Hieri-Mundi has some really cool scenes in this book. Oppo Rancis has some great scenes in this book. Yaddle has some cool scenes. And, what's his name? The long neck guy. I'm blanking on his name. But he's hilarious. Oh, he is absolutely hilarious. So this was a delightful. It's a fun book. It's a light read. John X. Miller's books tend to be pretty light, but I really had a blast reading this book. I think he's a really good author, and there was some stuff that I didn't care for. Love the plot. I think is just mediocre for him. I think a similar plot was done in one of Claudia Gray's books, and I think she did it better. But I still enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this book. Then we have number 18. That was number 19. My number 18 is going to be Persephone by Kevin J. Anderson and Jeffrey Morris. This is basically Jeffrey Morris wrote a science fiction script for a movie, and none of the major studios have picked it up. And so to try to sell it to the studio, he and Kevin wrote he had Kevin turn it into a novel. And of course, Jeffrey worked with him on it, and you can instantly tell which parts of this book Kevin wrote originally and which parts of it Jeffrey Morris wrote originally, because I know Kevin's writing style. I know Kevin. But I thought it was really an entertaining science fiction story, and it's got some really cool ideas. This book actually, it's kind of sad because it was part of a Kickstarter, and so if you participated in the Kickstarter, you got the book and get to read it. If you didn't participate in the Kickstarter, when I talked to Kevin, he said it's probably not going to come out to the general public for a while because they're working on some rights issues with the book to do a wide release of it. So if you got the Kickstarter, I think it's worth the read, but we'll have to wait if you didn't. But it's got some really cool ideas, some really original, creative science fiction ideas. All right. I also read, that was my number 18. My number 17 is one of the Icarus Saga books by Timothy Zahn. He released 3 Icarus Saga books this year, and what I think is the weakest, but still a pretty good book, was the Icarus Job. This is part of the Icarus Saga, searching for portals, basically, and you got Gregory and Celine, and they are asked to transport a mysterious woman to this mysterious location. And of the 3 Icarus books released this year, it's the blandest, most forgettable. But it was still an entertaining read. It's a puzzle box book. There's a lot of mystery to it. There's a lot of twists and turns. But this is the book that I was like, afterwards, I was like, I guess it's pretty good. I did enjoy it a lot. But yeah, this series has been a consistent 7 out of 10, and that's pretty much stayed for most of them, except for one of them. So I'll put that there. Where am I at? Next Generation, Star Trek The Next Generation, Pliable Truths. This is my number 16. This is by Dayton Ward. This is a Next Generation book, but as you can tell, it's also a DS9 book. It is basically the war for, not the war, but the Cardassians have officially given over the DS9 station. They have a different name for it, but they've given it over to the planet Beour, and the Bajorans are inviting the Federation to come to kind of help them with the station. And so you have the Cardassians there, the Bajorans, and the Federation all there at the same time. There's mysterious murders that happen, and also it's about like the power dynamics of handing over the place. And I actually rated this higher at the time than I really should have. I should have brought it down a little bit because I really enjoyed it in the moment, but it didn't stick with me as much as I thought it did. But it's still got some great entertaining scenes. And of course, Garrick shows up in this book. And of course, he's always delightful to read about. But yeah, it's a pretty good book. So that's why it's number 16. But it's not the best Star Trek book that came out this year. And I'll talk about that later. My number 15 is the Icarus Needle. This is the most recent penultimate Icarus Saga novel to come out. This one just came out in December, and this book is really setting up the end of the series. And it tells its own individual story, but it's also laying the groundwork for the finale. And Timothy Zahn did a very good job with this one. It's very much in line with his other books. If you enjoy the other Icarus books, you're going to enjoy this. I still feel that he is ship-baiting us with Gregory and Celine, but this book is absolutely hilarious. But this book has a great character show up that I really love that character. And he only shows up for a little bit, but he's pretty awesome. All right, where am I at? My number 14 is going to be Beour the Nameless, Star Wars Beour the Nameless by Zoraida Cordova. This is another middle grade book in the High Republic. I remember how I mentioned that Escape from Valo made another book better. The Star Wars Escape from Valo made this book, Star Wars Beour the Nameless, better. You continue on the story of these characters. The kids are back on Coruscant, and they are sent out on this mission, and something happens, and one group has to split off and go do something else. And I thought this is about the split off group, and I thought it was delightful, and I thought it was well written, and I thought the standout character of this book is Churro the Hutt, which is an awesome name for an awesome character. And boy, is it bold, making a Hutt like a scientist who's interested in like biology and stuff and botany. But it was really cool. I like Churro the Hutt, and so that's why this book is my number 14. My number 13 is a military science fiction book by Richard Fox titled Men of Breton, and I really enjoyed this book. This is basically you're following soldiers that are sent to this planet for this war. Something happens, they have to get the heck out of there quickly, and it's the first leg of a proposed journey for them to get home. And it's very much standard military stuff, but there are some incredible scenes in this book, some incredible moments. You really connect with the characters. It's also got it's got some really great humor, some really foul-mouthed stuff going on, but it's a really entertaining book, and I really had a blast with it. And it's really short, so it's a nice quick read. And so that's my number 13 is Men of Breton, the first book in the A Dream of Home series. Where am I at? My number 12 is going to be Star Wars Tears of the Nameless. And I said earlier that Defy the Storm was one of the best YA books that they've done in the High Republic. This is the best YA book in the High Republic. I really enjoyed what they did with the main characters. They brought back some characters from Phase 1 that have been kind of missing. They brought in Amadeo Azado Amadeo, however you pronounce his name. He shows up. He was really great in this book. I thought, and I'm blanking on the character's name at the moment, but I'm going to get it. Reith Silas. I was just blanking on the name. Reith Silas, who was in Phase 1. He comes back. He really should have been the YA through character for the whole series. I have many thoughts on how they should have fixed this series. But anyway, this was a very entertaining book. It really deals with the Nameless really well. And it also deals with some of the Nile, and it deals with the events that are happening with the Storm Wall and everything. It's setting up the end really well. And I really had a blast with this book. And that's why this is my number 12. My number 11 is going to be what I think was the best Star Trek book of the year, and that is Lost to Eternity by Greg Cox. This is an original series book. This has a ton of tie-ins to The Voyage Home and The Undiscovered Country. This book, actually, I rated it lower at the time when it came out than I should have. The other Star Trek book I read, I loved it at the time, and as I've gone through, I've been like, I didn't like it as much as I thought I did. This book, I liked it at the time, but I love it now that I've thought about it and had it marinate. And this book was just delightful. In Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, you have the character of Gillian Taylor, who is basically whisked off with the main cast, and the character's like, why? She goes on with the main characters, and the people from San Francisco don't know what happened to her. And so the book takes place in 2024, where a podcaster is trying to figure out what happened to Gillian Taylor. And it's delightful. It's weird hearing some 2024 parlance used in the book. One character says, "Okay, boomer." And I was like, what? That's why I didn't love it at the time that I read it. But as I think about it, I'm like, this is such a brilliant book. And I knew the answer to the mystery. And I just wanted the main characters to figure out what the mystery was. And it's just so delightful. There's also some other timelines that are taking place with our Star Trek main cast, including Saavik, who shows up, and anyway, there's a lot to love in this book, and it's got just such a great mystery and such great twists as well, and I love this. So that's why this is my number 11. So we're getting into my top 10 books published in 2024 that I read in 2024, and we'll kick off the top 10. Number 10 is going to be Beyond Enemies by Marissa Wolf. This is a science fiction, military science fiction about a girl and her AI. And her AI is currently inside a tank, and it has a gorgeous cover art here. And I had a lot of criticisms of this book when I read it, and I told Marissa my criticisms, but I actually think it's still a delightful book. I think it's got some really interesting questions and ideas. I think it really asks some really important things about AI. It also just tells a really cool story, a cool military science fiction story, and I think that Marissa did a great job here. So that's why this is my number 10. My number 9 book of the year that I read is a self-pub book titled Time March Warlock by Shami Stovall. This is the first book in a new series. I think the series is called Kronos Warlock or something like that. This is basically the Dresden Files meets Groundhog Day. And it is a detective who's trying to solve a murder, and he has to team up with the girl who's the daughter of the murderer. And it is a great book. I had a blast with this book. My number 8, and the last of the really great books, but not amazing books, is the Icarus Changeling by Timothy Zahn. This is, in my opinion, the best Icarus Saga novel. This book, I think, tells some really great puzzle box mystery stuff. It's got Gregory and Celine and some great situations that I love. The Changeling, which is a very creative title for the book. When you read the book, I thought was great. You need another member of Celine's species in this book. And I thought this book was really well done. So that's why it's my number 8. So we are ready to move into the best of the best. These are the top tier, amazing books. Had a blast with them. Oh my goodness, I'm just going to gush about these books. And let's start off with number 7. It is going to be A Silent Country by Morgan Shank. This is a self-published book, the 3rd book in a trilogy, the Low Country trilogy by Morgan. I know Morgan. I've been friends with him for a long time. I've been on the ground level reading this series, reading all his books, and he's a delightful author. And this is the final book in his trilogy, and I think he did a great job sticking the landing. If you like Westerns and you like fantasy, you will love this trilogy. This book is more fantasy than it is Western. The first book in the series is more Western than it is fantasy. But I read this book this year. It's a delightful book. You should definitely check out this trilogy. And it's really short, but I still think worth the pay of the price of the book. So that's why that is my number 7. I'm running out of space on my shelves. My number 6 book of the year published in 2024 is Shadow of the Smoking Mountain by Howard Andrew Jones. Howard Andrew Jones is writing the amazing Hanuvar Chronicles, or the Chronicles of Hanuvar, which is about the character of Hanuvar, who's basically Hannibal of Carthage. If Hannibal had survived the sacking of Carthage and tried to go back and free his people, this book is continuing that story, wraps up some storylines, also leaves open some other story threads. Howard Andrew Jones, unfortunately, was diagnosed this year with cancer, so we don't know if we're going to get more books in the series, but he's at least written the 4th book. We don't know when, if or when it's going to come out, but I love this series, and I think this is another great book. It's not as good as the first 2 books, but it's still a pretty good book. I'll put it down here. And my number 5, we're in my top 5 books of the year that were published in 2024. And we will start with the massive behemoth Wind and Truth, which is the most recent release on the list. I actually had to wait to make this list because I had to wait for this darn book to come out, and it was so long. Why do you have to wait to the end of the year, Sanderson? Why can't you claim like February as the beginning, as like when you publish your big chunkers? Anyway, this book just came out. It's a huge, epic conclusion to the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. It's massive, it's huge, so much is happening. I have a lot of criticism of the book, but I still love so much of the book, and I really resonated with what he wrote in this book. There's some great moments in this book. And so I won't talk about spoilers because I don't want to spoil anything. So that's my number 5 book of the year, published in 2024. Now for my number 4 is from a new author that is new to me this year, but I will continue reading him because he's delightful and he writes great books, and that is Stephen Arian's The Blood-Dimmed Tide. This is the second book in the Nightingale and the Falcon trilogy. I read the first book that came out last year, but I read it this year, The Judas Blossom. Loved it. Top book of the year for me. I think it's like my number 3 book of the year. And Blood-Dimmed Tide was also a fantastic book. This is historical fiction meets fantasy. It is the story of the Mongols and their conquering in the Middle East, but told from the other Middle Easterners' perspectives. And the Mongols are, they're there, and they're even, some of them are the main characters, but it is, the whole book, point of the book is trying to stop the Mongols. It's the other characters trying to use politics and military and strategy to try to stop the Mongols. And there's some fantasy elements because one of the characters has magic to him. Yeah. But it is really at its heart, it's a historical fiction book. And it's great. And Stephen Arian has made me a fan of his, and I will for sure read book 3 when it comes out, because this series is amazing. My number 3 book of the year, totally not on my radar, picked up the book because I'm a friend of the author, and I was blown away by this book. And I read it in a single sitting, basically. It's not like a literal one sitting, because I had to unfortunately get up because I read it on the way to an airport and in the airplane. But if you count, the time that I was walking as, not actually walking, but I was reading the whole time, and that is Mountain of Fire by Jason Cordova. This is technically part of the Black Tide Rising universe. It's a standalone. You can read it by yourself. I've never read the Black Tide Rising series, and I perfectly understood what was happening in this book. And it's utterly delightful. It is basically Catholic schoolgirls fight zombies. You might think, that's a weird premise. It's awesome. It's awesome. He did so much that was so cool in this book, and I was like, I didn't know I wanted that in my books. And there were also some moments that I was like, you know what? You got away with something I don't like, but it was so cleverly done. I'm going to allow it. Jason. I thought you did a great job with this. Jason's such a great guy. And this book is so delightful. I also read a book he did with Larry Correia, Monster Hunter Fever. Also a great book. But this one, this was also just so well done. And I hope Jason not only gets more novels from Baen and stuff, but I hope he gets a sequel to this, and I hope he gets other books in the Black Tide Rising series, because I think he did knock this out of the park. I was so amazed by this book. It was such a fun breeze through of a read. I can't gush about this enough. Speaking of good books I can't gush about enough, my number 2 book released in 2024 is Batman Resurrection by John Jackson Miller. I liked the Star Wars book he did this year, but we were all shocked when he got a Batman novel. And you know what? This is a vastly superior book. This is a Batman 1989 novel. It takes place right after the movie. It is basically the aftermath of the movie. There is a new villain in this book. The crime syndicates, after the Joker has died, are trying to figure out who's going to take over what. And there's a new villain who moves in, and I won't reveal which villain, although John Jackson Miller has revealed the villain in his marketing for the book. But there is a new villain in this book, and it is a really, really well-written villain, and it was so entertaining to read about. And it also sets up a sequel, which is coming out next year, which I'm so happy John Jackson Miller's getting. And in fact, John Jackson Miller said this book is getting its 3rd hardcover printing, which I'm super stoked for. That means it's selling well, and I'm really happy for John. But this was a great book, and it really is a good example of how to write media tie-in fiction. This is a franchise that is, the 1989, the Burton Batman movies have been gone for 30 years. And yet, John Jackson Miller revived the IP and makes me so excited for it, and made me think, maybe I should go back and watch the first Batman movie. Because it's just such a great book. So that's why this was the number 2 book released in 2024. However, this next book, my number 1, was such an obvious number 1 when I read it. that I knew it would stay there the whole year. And I was right. I would have loved for somebody to unseat it, but this book was an easy contender for best book published in 2024. And of all the books I read in 2024, it actually is the number 2 behind The Pillars of the Earth. But this book is The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan. All the other booktubers got to this before me. And so they were all, like Murphy Napier and Mike from Mike's Book Reviews and Patrick Leo, they all read it early and they enjoyed it. None of them gushed about the book. None of them loved it. And so I went in just expecting to like it, but I saw the premise, I saw the artwork done by Jeff Brown, who's a terrific cover artist, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna read it, and I was so excited and so floored by this book. It is a mystery that is also an epic political story that is also kind of an accidental side quest. So basically the main character is trying to figure out the mysterious death of his father, and he is sent to this city to try to uncover the mystery of it, and he ends up in order to uncover the mystery, he needs to get information. And in order to get that information, he has to do things for other people. And so it's basically, this book is a series of side quests. And it's delightful. It is utterly delightful to read. And I think that James Logan knocked it out of the park. Home run, grand slam of a book. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read the sequel the day it comes out. I'm super stoked. This is from Tor Publishing, which, by the way, first of all, good job, Tor, telling a book that guys will love. I think it's a great book. And also, the cover, I think, is amazing. So good on you, Tor. Good job. Keep doing that. But, this was such an amazing book. And I loved it. And I thought, I just think James Logan just wrote exactly the book I wanted him to write. And apparently this is a lot like The Lies of Lockamora, which means I should read that series. But I really loved this. And, it was so entertaining. And I want to know the mystery. I want to know. You do get a lot of answers in this book, but not all of them. So, this is the first book in a trilogy. Book 2 comes out later next year. So those are all of the books that I read in 2024 that were published in 2024. There was 34 books. I know this was a long video. I'm sorry for taking so long with it. But I'm so glad you stayed and watched the whole video. What was your favorite book that you read in 2024, published in 2024? I will be doing another video soon talking about all the books I read in 2024 and not ranking all of them, but talking about the best and the worst and stuff like that. But for now, what were your favorites and least favorites of the ones published this year? Let me know those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.